The beast of Gevaudan was a monster, real or imagined, that purportedly prowled the province of Languedoc, terrorizing its inhabitants during the mid-18th century. Despite being known to the students of the paranormal, not much has been said or written about it outside of France, where it is considered something of a cultural phenomenon. Its identity has been the subject of debate among the enthusiasts of the paranormal, as well as the religiously skeptic, with explanations ranging from unrelated attacks by groups of wolves to an instrument of wrath sent by God to punish the inhabitants. But in his book, Monsters of Gevaudan, The Making of a Beast, J. M. Smith approaches the matter from an entirely different perspective. The identity of the beast is immaterial to him. Whether or not it actually existed is of no consequence. What he considers is the milieu which could have given birth to this uniquely French creation. He considers the social, economic, scientific, historical, political, even the literary aspects of the only environment which could have led to the creation of this mystery. To him, the beast is a social phenomenon, the inevitable conclusion of the circumstances of time, and he proceeds to establish this with almost mathematical rigor. It is, perhaps, the most in-depth exploration of a pop culture phenomenon I've ever read, and bespeaks a thorough understanding of every aspect of the particular period in time during which this happens by the author. Whenever he speaks of his own opinions, he does so in a subtle, non-forceful manner. Nevertheless, the evidence is presented in such a convincing way that the same conclusions are reached by the reader. The Beast of Gevaudan is largely a cultural, social phenomenon of its time, and should be approached as such, appears to be the central point of this book. In the third chapter, the effects of France's doomed imperial conflicts with Britain and Prussia on public morale and perception are taken into account. As the author himself puts it, the European theatre of war between 1756 and 1763 never widened to include the remote Massif Central, but the war cast its shadow on the story of the beast in ways large and small. The ruinous economic and subsequently political consequences of the 7-Year War are discussed, and so are the effects of the post-war tedium on news media. Smith argues that the French defeat at the hands of the British created a desire for victory, a revanchisme of sorts, if you will. This, coupled with the military narrative that continues to dominate the society long after a war, and the news slowdown that inevitably follows wars of any magnitude, helped to transform what was essentially a local struggle into an all-out war. Chapter 4 discusses the role of a budding news media and an ever-increasingly literate audience in making the beast a superstar. It's the birth story of modern news media. It is a brief historiette of the birth of tabloids and popular media, but indeed focusing on the role they play on the beast becoming a celebrity in the modern sense of the word. In Chapter 5, the author uses concepts regarding fame and publicity from the previous chapter to introduce us to the main characters of the story and the interplay of publicity and their efforts, how they use this publicity to their advantage, and how publicity eventually caused their downfall, and how this emanation of publicity finally led to public disillusionment. Like any war, the war against the beast produced popular tales of heroes, ordinary men and women showing exceeding bravery in the face of a seemingly unbeatable monster. Like most heroic tales from wars, these were the combination of hearsay, media sensationalism, and conscious propaganda efforts, and this is the subject of the 6th chapter of the book. More broadly, Chapter 6 is devoted to the media image of the creature, as well as the authorities' attempts at fitting it into a framework they found more appropriate to their own ends. Chapter 7 deals with the struggles of the authorities against the beast, starting with those of Francois Antoine, whom Smith calls the first unofficial hunter-in-chief sent to the region to deal with the creature or creatures him succumbing to what Smith calls the beast hunting syndrome, starting off by gaining the trust of the local population, earning their admiration and respect, falling into self-doubt as the hunt progresses without fruition, lashing out against the peasants and those around him in frustration, and eventually losing their respect and cooperation. He calls Antoine one of the first glaring examples of this phenomenon, even though he admits Duhamel was an earlier example. Antoine's hunts, however, were not as anticlimactic as this early disappointment might have suggested, as they indeed did culminate in the famous capture of a wolf-like creature believed to be the beast, and the rest of the chapter is devoted to a detailed description of the circumstances surrounding the capture of this animal, its presentation to the king, Louis XV, its taxidermy, its eventual presentation at the Versailles, and what the courtiers, the media, and intellectuals thought about it. Chapter 8 deals with the reappearance of the beast when everyone thought it was disposed of, and the change in narratives, official or otherwise, dealing with the beast. From a crisis, the beast changed to more of an annoyance. Captures of more animals believed or proposed to be the beast, and the subsequent, rather unenthusiastic fanfare, and the change in public treatment of such ceremonies are highlighted. Also presented in this chapter is how the views regarding the authorities' actions, as well as the creature itself and the narrative surrounding it, evolved and changed over time. The last piece of the book proper is its conclusion. Smith mentions his trepidations about writing of this book, and how he was wary of the subject being modelled in popular conceptions, and how he wished to avoid this being yet another theory about the beasts of Gevaudan. This book is indeed not meant to be a theory about the identity of the beast or beasts, if such a creature or creatures ever existed. It is a historical and cultural study. It is a retelling of a unique period in time in French history. Monsters of Gevaudan, The Making of a Beast, is the story of the perfect storm. It is a detailed book. It is a thoughtful book. It is a different book, and one that I highly recommend. But no book review is complete without a word about its author. J.M. Smith is a professor of history, specializing in early modern France, especially late 17th and 18th centuries. His books include The Monsters of Gevaudan, The French Nobility in 18th Century, and Cheated, The UNC Scandal. Thank you for watching this video, and I bid you peace.